Hello friends, it's Kat from Yum Yum Kapow. I mentioned in my St. Cuthbert's Mill paper review video that the first time I tried Daniel Smith paints, I fell completely in love with them and never saw myself loving any other more. Turns out I may have swapped over to the Sennelier side, but before that I managed to amass quite a collection of Daniel Smith colors. One grouping that I've been curious about as to whether or not they could be used as their own palette are the Perylene colors. Perylene Violet is probably one of my top 10 favorite colors, and I love using it in shadows to give a nice depth, but I also really love mixing it with quinacridone gold to get a nice skin color for medium-toned people. If you're not already familiar with them, the 5 Perylene colors that are available, as far as I know, are Perylene Red, Perylene Scarlet, Perylene Maroon, Perylene Green, and Perylene Violet. So I figured, why not make a palette that's entirely just these 5 colors that I have and try to make something with them. And because I'm now apparently in some weird sort of scientific curiosity mode when it comes to how my paints function, I went for the full spread like the last few tests have been. Per usual, I whipped up a quick mini palette but didn't bother decorating it. Daniel Smith paints dry really well in the pans, and I had no trouble reactivating any of them, nor did I have any trouble with them crumbling or getting weird. So, having them in this little set was super convenient for when I wanted to see what they can do. I've said it before and I'll say it again. This layering test is possibly one of the best things ever. It's so interesting seeing how each brand and each color performs, and I was absurdly surprised to see that the majority of these colors simply don't layer well at all. The Perylene Red basically doesn't layer and stays almost entirely consistent from start to end, though I do know from experience just on the mixing chart alone that you can build up a thicker pigment load in one shot if you want. It just seems like there's no ability to build up through glazing. Arguably, the Perylene Scarlet and Perylene Maroon can glaze a tiny amount and seem to hit their maximum layering potential somewhere around the 3rd pass. Heck, even my precious Perylene Violet only got to about 3rd or 4th layer before it stopped being exceedingly effective. The longest holdout was Perylene Green, which I actually don't think I've ever used at all before this video, but I love the kind of dusty evergreen color to it and can totally see this being a huge asset for paintings of winter forests or something. As for the mixing chart, well, it becomes pretty obvious awfully quick that there's not really a lot of range in this selection. If you count the violet as being like a cousin to red, this is essentially 4 reds and a green, so our only real options here are red, green, and black. I made a space for mixing neutral colors, but didn't actually end up using it because the mixing chart already shows quite a few browns and blackish colors, which totally makes sense given that red and green are complementary colors and neutralize one another with ease. The red and the scarlet do seem to have the barest hint of opacity to them, but given that they both failed the layering test pretty hardcore, this shouldn't come as a surprise. What's nice to see is that they all lift decently well, and I would say that they're only semi-staining, meaning I doubt the paper could go all the way back to white without damaging the surface itself, but they weren't so stubborn in holding onto the paper that they couldn't be at least lightened. To test how much they bloom or flow across the page in a wet-on-wet application, I laid down a thin layer of clean water in this box and then dotted on some of each color. The Perylene Red and Perylene Green stay pretty much stock still, but the Scarlet and Maroon are big fans of spreading themselves out. Violet also gave good attempt at territory claim, but I'd say it still retains some of its initial shape. Knowing how a color blooms when used wet on wet helps you know how easily it will blend so you can avoid harsh edges, if that's something you worry about. The final test is a practical test, and like many of these that I've done, I chose to start with a doodle finder. Just scribble on the page, find doodles inside the scribbles, and go to town. These 3 characters ended up being some kind of spookums, though which kind, I don't really know, but regardless, it's a good thing that there aren't really many human flesh tones to work with because that's just not what these colors lend themselves to. Overall, if you use a limited color palette, regardless of whether or not the colors are ones you would normally choose, limited palettes always come with a sort of built-in cohesiveness. In this case, less almost always ends up being more. I've managed to make pieces with 6 or less randomized colors that by all means shouldn't have gone together, but end up looking way better than when I have free reign over a 36 color palette that has an absurd number of options. So, while I don't necessarily think an all Perylene palette is necessarily well-rounded or even useful in a large number of situations, I think it works here. Part of me wishes that I'd broken my own self-imposed rule and added a yellow of some sort to the game, but I can't say I regret the experiment. Especially because I really kind of love the way this piece came out. I've decided the dude on the right is a troll, and the one in the middle is a demon, but I have no idea what the left is. A goblin? Some kind of weird frog thing? Meh. Not important. It's basically spookums, and I love me some spookums. Will I use this palette again as a standalone? Very unlikely, but a lot of these colors are ones I already use with a decent amount of regularity. The red and scarlet are my go-to for a warm red color, especially back during my 2017 Inktober paintings. And that violet, you'll have a hard time convincing me it isn't gorgeous and super useful. The maroon and green are mostly new to me, but they especially intrigue me for neutralizing other colors and bringing an intentional calm dullness to their opposites. I actually think I've been using Schmincke's Perylene Maroon in portraits lately because it's a good blush color that isn't neon pink like I normally go for. The green? I have a feeling it's going to join Perylene Violet in shadowing other colors, and I'm excited about the potential. What do you think? If you could take away one color from this set and add another in its place, what would be that one color swap? Or would you leave it as is? There is a beauty to their richness, and the sort of earthiness that some of their mixes makes brings me, again, to that idea of wintry forest landscapes somehow. If you'd like to try the paints for yourself, I've linked all the materials in the doobly-doo, but I'm curious, is this a set that you'd want to buy a pre-made palette of? Let me know if this should go on my list of sets to make. Until I see you next time, I wish you peace, love, and Perylene. Bye!